This should be the worship one, and that's Daniel 11, time of the end. It's marked worship on the program.
Time of the end is at 2, right?
Time of the end, Alliances is at 2 o'clock. Yeah.
So this is worship. Well, tell us something.
Yeah, I'm not too worried while we're waiting. I was getting into an Uber a couple of weeks ago in Kansas City. And the lady that picked me up, wearing spaghetti strap t-shirt kind of a thing, or no, I wouldn't call it a t-shirt, but she's everywhere except her face is tattooed, right? She's probably about 30, and she's a free spirit. She's spiritual, but it's not exactly Christian spiritual. And she asked, what was I doing in Kansas City? Oh boy, is that a lead-in. Said I was doing our presentations on Daniel 11, Islam and Christianity Prophecy Seminars. Oh, what's that about? And I decided I'd tell her a quick story to help her understand. Said I was in Southern California. You might know where that is. And I was walking into a hotel really late, 11-something. I came from a presentation, and I'm wearing one of these shirts. And there's a guy that I would guess was Muslim sitting behind the counter. And he's staring at my shirt. And I'm usually saying, Lord, give me somebody to talk to. This particular night, I'm saying, Lord, I don't want to talk. I want to go to bed. He doesn't ask me a question. And he gives me my room key. My wife and I go to the room. We go in the room. No towels. I said, we can wait till, my wife says, I want a towel now. Please go get towels. Okay, I go back up to the counter. And I said, we don't have any linens, towels in our, man, he gives me a stack of them. I mean, it was with interest. I mean, it was a lot of them. And I'm so sorry, and he gives me all these things. And he said, sir, I probably shouldn't ask. What does that mean? I said, okay, Lord, here goes. I said, I do a seminar on Daniel 11. And it's about how Jerusalem gets caught in the middle, Islam hits from the south, the papacy from the north. There are 3 conflicts, the Crusades, the time of the end, and the Ottomans. And I said, but at the end, there's a small group of Muslims and a small group of Christians that come together and follow God and what the Bible teaches. He said, I'm a Muslim. I'm like, I didn't know that. But yeah. He said, I'm a Muslim. He said, and if Islam is a religion of peace, why is there so much bloodshed everywhere it is? He said, I have to have something to teach my children. He said, but then I looked at Christianity and I didn't like what I saw. I said, God doesn't either. And God's true people get caught in the middle. I explained a bit more, and I said, if I give you a book, will you read it? I was going to be in the hotel for 3 days. He was almost done by the time I left with that book. And he was getting excited that there was something that he could teach his kids. I told this free spirit lady this, and she got excited about something that could expose the evils of both and bring the good of both together. Do you realize that the Daniel 11 message reaches from the Muslim to the secular to the Christian? Why are we afraid of it? Why do we ignore it? I find it amazing. So, there's a few more people than last time, so I'm going to do a very brief overview. Seventh-day Adventists know Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 very well. Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, Rome, divided Rome with a little horn, right? Okay, folks, if you know that, you know who the king of the north is, because each one of those invade Israel from the north. You have Babylon coming in from the north, then the Persians come in from the north, then the Greeks come in from the north. The Greek Empire splits 4 ways. He cares about 2. The Seleucid and the Ptolemy, they fight back and forth. Jerusalem gets caught in the middle, and God's people get caught in the middle all the way to end of time. That's why you're caught in the middle today. Then the Roman Empire comes in from the north. And you get the time of Jesus. And with the force of a flood, they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. Jesus dies in verse 22. He's caught right in the middle. And my friends, Jesus knows what it's like in the middle. He died in the middle. He's with his people that are caught in the middle. At the end, he rescues his people that are caught in the middle. Daniel 11 is more about Jesus than anything else in Daniel, I believe. And then the Roman Empire splits 10 ways, but again, Daniel only cares about 2, north and south. Because several parts fit together in the north and some in the south, and Jerusalem gets caught in the middle again. And that's that way all the way through. And it is both a literal, Jerusalem gets caught in the middle, but it also is playing out globally in how God's people of faith are getting caught in the middle, because God's Sabbath keepers are his people of the covenant. The Sabbath in Jerusalem is still the seventh-day Sabbath to this day, but it is for a covenant keeper everywhere in the world. King of the north didn't want to be called Jewish or Israelite, changed the day of worship to Sunday. King of the south didn't want to be Jewish or Israelite, changed the day of worship to Friday. And I can just tell you, it doesn't matter where in the world you go, you will be dealing with the king of the north or the king of the south or their allies if you're a Sabbath keeper. You are caught in the middle. But the good news is Daniel 11 shows you what's going on around you. And you don't have to feel like you're lost in a dark world. I will tell you this, if you're going to wait for a Sunday law to wake you up, you will wait too long to wake up. Daniel 11 is the early warning signal. And my friends, Daniel 11 is already in the process of fulfillment, and I'm watching it day by day. There were some fulfillments this week in Pomona, believe it or not. We'll get to that. So it is literal and global. Daniel 11:29, at the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. 3 conflicts, Crusades, Ottomans, and the time of the end. We went through the first 2 already, so to this presentation we're looking at the time of the end where we live. You had Arab Islam up through the Crusades against the papacy, the dark line. Oh boy, they're both dark on this one. I'm colorblind, so hopefully there's red showing up in that one. But that was first conflict, Arab Islam. Second conflict with Ottoman Islam. Third, between the papacy and Islam, is at the time of the end. But there are allies that come into play as well during the time of the end, and we'll get to that in particular this afternoon. Here's what the text says about the time of the end. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. So during the time of the end, the king of the south will be on the attack against the king of the north. And I will say, and their allies, because Revelation gives us allies as well. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. Revelation 13:3, and all the world follows the beast. That's when the king of the north strikes back. We are in the lead up to it. Daniel 11 will show us what the king of the south is, that is the entrance to the king of the north when all the world follows him. This is what we should be watching in our world right now. He, the king of the north, shall also enter the glorious land, that is Israel. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. Those are all Abrahamic relatives. They're all in western Jordan today. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. In case you didn't notice it, that's a 3-way split. Egypt and many countries are overthrown when the king of the south goes down. Libya and Ethiopia will follow the king of the north, and Edom, Moab, and Ammon will escape from the king of the north. Let's see. Egypt, Libya, Ethiopia, Western Jordan. Do they have more in common with Islam or secularism? This is all Islamic sphere of influence in the world, especially when you look at ancient boundaries for things like Libya and Ethiopia. Oh, so context should be screaming at us, this is still Islam as the king of the south. But they're going to have allies in Revelation. Now, according to this, Egypt and many countries go down, so you're going to have a push from the king of the south. The radicals go down. The moderates follow the king of the north, the papacy. And some escape. The Bible is clear that the only way to escape is by trusting in Jesus Christ. And those people who escape in Daniel 12:1 are the ones, the same word is used for God's people who are delivered when he rescues his people. So God has a remnant out of Islam. He has a remnant out of papal-led Christianity. That's good news right out of Daniel 11. Okay? Now, some definitions that you need to understand for today. Number one, caliphate. A caliphate is ruled by a ruler called a caliph who has both political and religious power worldwide. You heard of a papacy? The Pope. He claims global religious and political power. King of the North, King of the South. They both claim global power politically and religiously. If they both claim that they're going to rule the world politically and religiously someday, is there room for both of them on the same planet? Nope. And every time you have a caliphate, you end up with a holy war. Every time. Arab Islam, Crusade. Ottoman Islam, the Holy League conflict. Time of the end? Well, I'm going to show you it's already happening. Islamist. These are what we often think of as radicals, but they're not that radical. They're actually, well, they're radical, but they're trying to put a radical application of the Quran in the practice. They want to bring about a global caliphate by force, and they want to establish the city of Al-Quds as its capital. You know of that place. You know it as Jerusalem. They call it Al-Quds. You call it Jerusalem. Let's see. If all the radical Muslims in the world want to make Jerusalem their capital for the global empire, do you think there is any chance today that Daniel could be correct that Jerusalem gets caught in the middle? Yeah. But Islam hadn't come on the scene when Daniel wrote all this stuff. Daniel has never missed a detail in sequence. And you're going to find out they're happening right now as he predicted. Who are these people? Include the Muslim Brotherhood. By the way, Daniel says Egypt goes down. Modern radical Islam was born with the Muslim Brotherhood in the 1920s in Egypt. Egypt goes down. They also include Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State. Erdogan in Turkey wants to do this. Iran in big time wants to do it. They want to set up a caliphate. Do you know what the Iranian special forces are called today? There's a special group within the Republican Guard called the Quds Force. Where did they want to set up the capital? Al-Quds. It's like Iran is saying their special forces are the Jerusalem force. And believe me, Israel knows what they're saying. Iran says they're going to wipe Israel off the face of the map. Oh well. Moderate Muslims, Libya and Ethiopia, in the prophecy, are those who are opposed to a caliphate by force, and these are the ones signing up to the Abrahamic Accords with Israel. And Saudi Arabia is toying right now with coming on board. In 2011, our first book came out. That's the one you probably have, Pastor. And in it, it said there's a day coming when the radical Muslims would anger the Pope would call for war against radical Islam, the United States and its allies would be the military enforcer. I got that from Revelation 13. Moderate Islam would follow the papacy and Christianity, and some Muslims would follow Jesus and the Bible. When I wrote that, a little bit of number 6 was happening. The rest of it had not happened. I was fully convinced that I had to write that book so that when it happened, we could say, we already knew this in prophecy. You see, if you're not willing to put it in writing, you can say later, well, that's what I believed, and everybody says, sure. You put it in print and then have it happen. Do you know what's happened with a lot of Seventh-day Adventist scholars since it's already happening? They said, Tim, you can't talk about current events. What? You talk about, say, here's what's going to happen. Now that it's happening, they don't want me to say that because they don't have any current events to talk about. That's the way my life goes. But you're going to find out that's what happens all over the world when you start cheering for Jesus. They'll try and change the topic on you. But 2011, this book came out. 2014, in sequence, bang, 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 it began to happen. Here we go. Abu Bakr, I should tell you, I have the source and the date for all these stories. And believe me, I'm not giving you all the stories. You'd be here for a long, long time. But they are in date order. You're watching the whirlwind unfold. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed leader of the Islamic State stretching across Iraq and Syria, has vowed to lead the conquest of Rome as he called on Muslims to immigrate to his new land to fight under its banner around the globe. Just dawned on me, you guys have a different format up than last time. Thank you up there. This was day one of the modern caliphate. They were establishing the global caliphate. On day one, they said it was a conquest of Rome, which is the king of the north. I didn't know that on day one, the king of the south, now we have a functioning king of the south for the first time since the Ottoman Empire. Day one, they say, we're after Rome. That's pretty impressive for day one. Got my attention. The question now is, how long would it Pope to take the call for war? I mean, the Pope's the man of peace, right? How long would it take him to call for war? You want to guess? It was only 5.5 weeks. And he called for war and got it. That really happened? It did. But because Seventh-day Adventists weren't studying Daniel 11, very few people noticed. August 7, 2014, I can remember where I was on that date just like I can on September 11. Because this was a time I was waiting for when the Pope called for war. On August 7, 2014, Pope Francis appealed to world leaders on Thursday to help end the crisis in northern Iraq. After a sweeping advance by radical Islamic State militants forced thousands of residents of Iraq's biggest Christian town to flee their homes. His Holiness addresses an urgent appeal to the international community to take action to end the humanitarian tragedy now underway. I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan at an ASI convention, and I'm sitting in my booth. I go online to check what's happening because I know stuff's going down, and I see this declaration from the Pope. It is a call for war against the caliphate. He's asking for military action. He did that, he got the Crusades. He did that, he got the Holy League against the Ottomans. And now he's doing it with radical Islamic caliphate. What's going to happen? I started sharing with people around me that I believe that very day prophecy was being fulfilled. I'm at a Seventh-day Adventist gathering. 5,000 Adventists wandering around that place. I've got an exhibit, and they're coming by my booth. And I'm telling people, and they're going, maybe. Nobody cared. It wasn't the Sunday law that they've been waiting on. Again, if you wait for the Sunday law, you're going to wait too long to wake up. There was a lull, and there weren't very many people around my exhibit, and I was just fit to be tied. And I told my wife, I'm going to grab some books and DVDs, I'm going fishing. What does that mean? She's got to stay in the booth. I'm going to go looking for somebody to talk to. There was a guy from about halfway down the aisleway in another booth, sitting there with nobody at his booth either. Robert Falkenberg Sr., share him booth. And I headed down there, and he had 2 chairs. He's sitting on one of them. And I said, can I talk to you, Elder Falkenberg? He said, sure, have a seat. I said, I'm going to offer you this book and DVD if you want it, but first let me tell you about it. I told him Daniel 11 really quickly and what had just happened that very day. I said, I believe it's happening. I said, do you want the book and DVD to study it? He said, yes. A few days later, the people that took care of our website for sales, books and DVDs, called me up and said, Elder Falkenberg just bought a bunch of your stuff. A day or 2 later, Elder Falkenberg contacted us and wants your phone number. Can we give it to him? Yes. Elder Falkenberg, for the last 2 years of his life, and I were in back and forth communication often face-to-face communication. He became my mentor in how to deal with the GC when I have challenges. He's had challenges with the GC too. He understood that. And boy, I needed that. I dearly miss him. But anyway, that all started this day. The very next day, the President of the United States says America is coming to help. King of the South will push against the King of the North. The King of the North will call for war, and the U.S. and their ally will become the ally to give the military force. Next day is pretty quick. Within 36 hours of the Pope's call for action, the United States struck the Islamic State for the very first time. Pretty quick turnaround. Bang, 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 we're working down the list. That should put us into the third conflict, and I believe that is where we are to this day. It's still ongoing. I just don't know how long it will be. Notice the date. 6 days after the Pope's call for action. The American media and world media was actually saying, the United States probably shouldn't have attacked the Muslims because the Pope was probably just wanting humanitarian action, not military action. So the Pope sent out his ambassadors, this one the UN ambassador, to make it clear he wanted military action. The Holy See's ambassador to the United Nations, Silvano Tomasi, this weekend supported U.S. airstrikes aimed at halting the advance of Sunni Islamic State militants, calling for intervention now before it's too late. While the Vatican vocally disapproved of the U.S.-led campaign in Iraq in 2003 and the 2013 plan for airstrikes on Syria, fearing both might make the situations worse for Christians on the ground, fears of ethnic cleansing by Islamists has forced a policy change. Whoa, what forced the man of peace to come out and call for war? The Islamists, the caliphate believers pushing. Daniel 11, the king of the south pushes against the king of the north, and the king of the north comes out in war fashion. Folks, we're looking at an exact fulfillment of Bible prophecy here. The media accidentally gets it right. From that time on, the United States is known as the Dog of Rome by the Muslims. In this case, Jihadi John said to Obama, the Dog of Rome. Jihadi John is the guy that cut off Daniel Pearl's head and others on YouTube videos. He called Obama the Dog of Rome, and shortly thereafter he died of a drone strike called by Obama. But let's see. If the papacy says sic 'em and the U.S. bites, what is the United States? The attack dog for Rome. You haven't noticed? Revelation 13 is already being fulfilled. The United States is already the enforcer for Rome. It's been that way for several years now. But most people are sleeping on. That's a dangerous thing to do. And look at this. Pope Francis wants to be president of the world. Huffington Post. But shrewdly, methodically, and with a showman's flair, the soft-spoken 78-year-old Argentinian Jesuit priest named Pope Francis showed Thursday that he is running to become president of the planet, and the Huffington Post, a liberal group, was willing to back him. I want you to notice something. During the time of the Crusades, the world was threatened by a radical, violent form of Islam, a caliphate. And the world followed the Pope against the caliphate. During the Ottoman Empire, the world was threatened by a violent form of Islam, a caliphate. And the world followed the Pope against the caliphate. The time of the end, the world is once again threatened by a violent form of Islam, a caliphate. And who do they turn to? The Pope. Folks, it is so clear who the powers are today. It is very easy from Daniel 11 to show who the beast power is. The little horn, the king of the north. It's exceedingly simple, but we miss the easy one and use the hard ones. A mass migration crisis, and it may yet get worse. I don't think this wave can stop, said Sonia Licht of the International Center for Democratic Transition. The global north must be prepared that the global south is on the move, the entire global south. This is not just a problem for Europe, but for the whole world. The global south. What's the global south? Ever heard of BRICS? The BRICS economy? Just had a meeting. China, Russia, Iran, Brazil, India, thinking about setting up their own economic system to bypass the US dollar. The guy that came up with the term BRICS, for the initials of different countries involved in it, also interchangeably calls it the global south. Think for a moment. China and Russia, global south. But if you look at Revelation 11, the powers that come out of the French Revolution, atheistic secularism, Marxism, all of a sudden it lines up as the allies of the King of the South with radical Islam. And they are allied. We'll show you that as we go. But the global north is under attack by the global south. It's happening radical Islam, it's happening migrationally, it's happening economically. How many ways do you have to have before it gets your attention? During the 2016 election, and we haven't had a sane election since. And this one's shaping up to be wilder than any of the others, isn't it? Donald Trump was asked what he would do with radical Islam if he won. He said, the point is they, radical Islam, want to do serious harm. True. We have to take them out. We have to take them out very, very swiftly and viciously if necessary. We've got to destroy the brand of jihad. And he came in and he doubled the number of bombs and missiles hitting radical Islam. Right off the bat, he doubled it. Oh, the radical Muslims did not like him. Still don't. He claimed he beat radical Islam, but yeah, that wasn't true. But now he wants to come in and finish the job. I am here to tell you some American president will wipe out radical Islam. It might be him. I don't know if he makes it back in or not. But somebody up here says he won't. I didn't think he'd make it in the first time. So I'm not here to tell you who will win and who won't win. That somebody said Tim Roosenberg claims to be a prophet. I said, I am not. I study the prophets. I present on what they say, and they don't tell me who won. I don't know. I know the issues involved, though. During his inauguration, Trump said the following: we will reinforce old alliances and form new ones and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. I just went blank on a guy's name. Religious Liberty guy, editor for Religious Liberty magazine. Long time he was in there. No, after Roland. British guy. Anyway, he was in Southern California, and so was I. We were doing different seminars, and he and I disagree on Daniel 11. Lincoln Steed, thank you. And he was in Loma Linda church, and I was in a smaller church. He had more pull than I did. And he contacted me. He said, hey, let's go out to the Indian restaurant in Loma Linda after sundown, Saturday night. He said, I want to talk. Deal. I showed up, and a lawyer was there with us. Alan Reineck. He's a good guy. I love having a conversation with Alan. So the three of us were in that restaurant, and we got talking about Daniel 11, and Alan's just listening in. He's moderator. And Lincoln says, you will never convince me that radical Islam is overthrown by the papacy. We went on the other topics. We're walking out of the restaurant. There's a car between us in the parking lot. I remember looking over the roof of the car, and I said, hey, Lincoln, Revelation 13:3, all the world follows the beast. Do you believe it? He said, yeah. I said, so where'd radical Islam go? He just stopped. He looked at me. He said, you ever been on my television program? That wasn't the response I was expecting. I said, no. He said, I'll be in touch. And within a month, I shot 6 half-hour episodes on Daniel 11, first television program. They will be completely eradicated at some point. Prophecy said they will be overthrown. It has not yet happened. But the beginnings of the attacks are there. Trump said he was going to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of the nation of Israel. Now, what do you think the radical Muslims are going to do if they wanted Jerusalem as their capital? That going to make them happy? No. 6 days later, in a meeting in Turkey, the caliphate people that want Jerusalem as their capital get together for a meeting. Oh, they're mad. Here's an interesting statement from that meeting. Soleimani says Iran is ready to back Palestinian forces. Soleimani is the commander of the Al-Quds force for Iran. Second most powerful man in Iran. Soleimani, commander of the Al-Quds force, says his nation is ready to support Palestinian forces in the Gaza Strip days after the U.S. recognized Jerusalem as its capital. So a couple of interesting things. Number one, Soleimani is Shiite Muslim. Palestinians are Sunni Muslim. They usually don't get along very well. But in this case, he's now ready to arm them and help them against Israel and the United States. The other important thing to notice is why you don't know where Al-Quds is. Look at that. There's Al-Quds, and there's Jerusalem in the same sentence, and they give you no hint that it's one and the same place. They talk about them like they're two separate places. This is how the media can hide things in front of your face, and you don't know the truth. Al-Quds is the Arabic name for Jerusalem. Look it up. It's really simple. But they don't want you to know that. So they use Jerusalem and Al-Quds like they're separate places. Here's a picture of Soleimani. It's an Iranian propaganda picture. I have collected several Iranian propaganda pictures over time. They're kind of entertaining to me. The little bit of print there in English says, "We will crush the USA under our feet." Soleimani has a radio. He claimed they have about 1,000 terror cells in the United States. He's the commander of the Al-Quds force. He's calling in a strike. Where? It's not the Capitol. That is the White House. Notice the bomb going off on the roof and the U.S. flag falling. Who lives on the second story of the White House? President. At that moment, a guy by the name of Donald Trump. Look at his window. Smoke blasting out of his window. Little hint that they're after Trump. What do you know about Donald Trump? Somebody threatens him? That puts you on his hit list. Politicians know what it's like to get put on his hit list. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. If you do something that threatens him, he will try and take you out. Is that accurate? Yeah. How do you like to be Soleimani after that picture comes out? One president after another had the opportunity to take out Soleimani, but as the number 2 man in Iran, it was always too risky to take out. No president would say, take him out. Saudi prince. Saudi Arabia's powerful crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, has described Turkey as part of a triangle of evil along with Iran and hardline Islamist groups. Well, you're starting to see the Muslim world breaking into pieces. Radical Islam, moderate Islam, and you're going to see in a little bit there's a part that's turning to Jesus. Daniel has a 3-way split, friends. It's currently happening. I'm kind of excited about that. It means we're getting closer and closer to the coming of Jesus. Now, most people watch the news and they go, oh, it's terrible. I watch the news and I go, Jesus is coming. Good news. Your perspective means something. Do you choose to live in misery or in joy? You give your past to Jesus, you give your present to Jesus, you give your future to Jesus, and you don't need to be living in fear and misery. So he sees this 3-way split going on. Saudi prince also accused Turkey of trying to reinstate the Islamic Caliphate, which Erdogan wants to do, abolished nearly a century ago when the Ottoman Empire collapsed. In this triangle, they are trying to promote the idea that our duty as Muslims is to reestablish the caliphate, that the glory of Islam is in building an empire by force. We have no duty anymore to fight to spread Islam, but in the triangle of evil, they want to manipulate Muslims to tell them their duty as Muslims requires the establishment of a Muslim empire. I believe the Palestinians and the Israelis have the right to have their own land. And the Saudis right now are trying to establish a deal with Israel that does exactly that. Gives them both the right to have land. Up until this moment in the Muslim world, if you said, this is 2018, if you said the Israelis have a right to have land, you'd probably die if you were a Muslim. But here's the Saudi crown prince, the power of Saudi Arabia, saying Israel has a right to have land. And within about a week's time, there was gunfire in the palace, an assassination attempt. The crown prince disappeared for about a week, and the Iranians started celebrating his death. Crown prince came out of hiding, hating Iran worse than ever. But we have to have a peace agreement to assure the stability for everyone and to have normal relations, and they're currently working on it. U.S. Embassy opens on May 14, 2018, about a year and a half, 2 years early. Why did Trump rush the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem? This picture might tell you. It was exactly 70 years after the formation of the nation of Israel. There's a group in Israel that wants to rebuild the temple. And they put out a commemorative coin design, Trump Declaration. What you have is 70 years from 1948 to 2018. He does it exactly on the 40th or 70th anniversary, of the founding of the nation of Israel. The man in the background, Cyrus the Great. After 70 years of captivity, Cyrus said, "Jerusalem is yours," and they rebuilt the temple. After 70 years of statehood, Trump says, "Jerusalem is yours," and they believe they will rebuild the temple. If they rebuild the temple, will that be a peace-causing event or a war-causing event?
War.
Ever been up on the Temple Mount? It's a dicey place. I've been there. They have people with machine guns and grenade launchers all around there. They're there to kill people that start killing people. If you doubt that this is an important topic, you haven't been some places. I was preaching to a group of 2,000 people one day, and they had men with machine guns in the doorways facing out. I was in northeastern Nigeria in Boko Haram territory, a radical Muslim Islamist group. And they aren't kidding. Those men had well-worn machine guns that were standing in the doorway facing out. They told me in the break between Sabbath school and church to stay inside, don't go outside. I didn't know about the guys with guns in the doorways. They were standing outside the closed doors. I slipped out a side door. I turned around and came back in when I realized why I wasn't supposed to be out there. This is a real topic in this world today. Enough so that in parts of the world, it's deadly serious. Then the Pope goes to the United Arab Emirates. And this was really important. Look at the subtitle of the Atlantic's article. The meaning of the Pope's historic visit to the United Arab Emirates. What has changed in brief is the dual rise of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic State. The following analysis applies equally to the Emirates and to Saudi Arabia, and yeah, it does. Facing direct challenges, the Gulf states calculated that they could no longer appease Islamists and should instead crush them. In 2001, at 9/11, Saudi Arabia and other Muslim nations were trying to just look the other way with the radicals. That's how we got all those Saudi Arabian radicals attacking the U.S. They decided to change that. They should instead crush them. That is precisely what they have done, both in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. The numbers of beheadings of Saudi Arabians went way up because they started beheading Muslim Brotherhood followers, the radical Muslims. The institutional authorities of Islam and the political authorities with which they are aligned have just bought themselves an institutional ally, if not a theological one. Whether the alliance keeps the theological barbarians at bay is another question. So, Tim, you really think Muslims will ally themselves with the Pope? Yeah, because they already have. When the Pope went there, they signed alliances and agreements. Interesting, they made agreements with the United Arab Emirates, and right away, the United Arab Emirates are the first one that joined with Trump and Israel in the Abrahamic Accords. And one after another starts joining in. Islam puts out another picture. Iranian Islam. Ever heard a picture's worth 1,000 words? Every ship that's being attacked out there is flying an American or Israeli flag. It says we drowned them all. The focal point is the Dome of the Rock in Al-Quds, Jerusalem. They're being very honest here. They're showing you what their goal is. Why are they attacking shipping and other things? Because they want Al-Quds. It's all about Al-Quds. They just established an airport in I think it's Lebanon where they can attack Israel from. Expect it to get blown up any day now. Israel tends to do that when there's a threat from Iran. But look carefully at the water. It's not water. It's a Palestinian headscarf. Why are the Shiite Palestinians supporting Shiite Iranians supporting Sunni Palestinians? Because they all want Al-Quds for a caliphate. It's all about Al-Quds. The picture tells you. They'll tell you in outright words too, but their art's pretty clear. Then Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed, the leader of the Islamic State. They just replaced him with another guy. He got killed. There's now a third caliph. If he gets killed, they'll replace him too. But this third one, he's been kind of invisible. For some reason, he doesn't seem to want to die. But the Islamic State, Trump said they wiped him out. In that case, why are they holding cities and territory way down in the Mozambique and other areas, south of the equator now? They just spread out, is what they did. Then, a pivotal date. January 7, 2020. This is when Iran and the United States went to war. You may not have noticed. This was the Drudge Report. The leading headline was, "It's War." What's going on? January 3, Donald Trump gave the order and Soleimani was blown to little pieces. I mean little pieces. They identified his body with his finger with a ring on it. They found the finger laying in the yard near the car that blew up. That's the number 2 man in Iran. Iran said, and Trump made no bones about it, the U.S. had called for the strike. And the leadership of Iran said, we will attack the United States openly from Iranian forces. And Trump said, you better not. If you do, just know this. I have, 68 missiles already with the targets dialed in. That was one missile for every hostage during the Iranian hostage crisis. Very symbolic numbers, okay? And he said, you need to know that the targets that are already dialed in include military targets, include cultural targets, and include religious targets in Iran. And you know anything about targeting? U.S. and NATO targeting tries very hard to hit only military, do not hit cultural and religious targets. Trump said, you kill one American in retaliation, and we're going in the holy war, is what he's saying. Our targeting changes if you kill one American. And they didn't know for sure if Trump meant it or not, but he probably did. And they decided to attack anyway. And on January 7, waves of missiles hit American bases, not bases in Iraq and Syria. Coming out of Iran, directly fired by Iranian forces. How do you attack multiple American bases with multiple missiles without killing anybody? 50 to 100 Americans were so close to the missiles blowing up that they got concussions. Guess how many died? 0. So Trump held fire. That night, the Iranians even shot down a passenger jet by accident. We came very, very close to going into all-out holy war that night. The world, headlines already had it as war, but it didn't happen. I can give you why. Because in Revelation, it tells us that there are 4 angels holding back the winds of strife when God's people aren't ready. And folks, we weren't ready. And God said, gonna hold it back. And what was on the verge of holy war died down. Did the radical Muslims forget? No. This is just a little bit later. Siam can be seen telling the enthusiastic crowd that 3 prophecies would soon be fulfilled, that the rightly caliphate will be established, that Jerusalem will be liberated and establishes its capital, and that Islam would achieve world domination. In case you're wondering where Alaska is, it's on top of the Temple Mount. It's the mosque by the Dome of the Rock. Then COVID-19 hit. And the threat of radical Islam disappeared. Or did it? It disappeared from your media stream. Because the media stream had something else to hype. And they were more than happy to not talk about this anymore. Because to talk about radical Islam is Islamophobia, and that's not allowed today. And so they had a reason not to. They took it. But did it make it go away? This was just June 11. I was doing a presentation, so I went on Jihad Watch just to see what attacks had happened that week. Now, you can go to Jihad Watch any day of the week you want, and you'll see what's been happening with radical Islam all over the world. Burkina Faso, Muslims murder 58 people in attacks targeting Christians. Then I was noticing something. Red-green Twitter storm to America, burn baby burn, and Philadelphia Muslim cleric says demonstrations are useless, fighting and bloodshed are needed. What's going on? June of 2020, Rodney Floyd riots, Black Lives Matter. And the radical Muslims were trying to make the Black Lives Matter marches more violent. Red-green Twitter storm, red, radical left Marxist, green, radical Muslim. And all of a sudden, a unity, alliance between radical Islam and Marxism showed up all over the world, came out in the open. As I started looking at it, it had been there since at least the 60s. But it came out in the open during COVID. Crisis Magazine, conservative Catholic magazine. Not since the Cold War have we experienced such violent political, cultural, and spiritual unrest. Not since the Civil War has our country been divided so bitterly against itself. Our civilization is under attack from the far left within and radical Islam without. Conservative Catholics realize that they have the radical left and radical Islam both attacking them. Adventists have been arguing, is it the king of the South, is it Islam, or is it the radical left out of the French Revolution? Answer, they're allies. Yes, they're both doing it. We don't need to argue about which one of us is right. We're both right on that sense. Now let's work together. Biden wins the election. It emboldens radical Islam. If you doubt that, just note what happened on September 11 this year. The White House releases a statement on September 11 praising the Saudis for what they've been doing. Oh, on September 11, when it was Saudis that killed Americans on September 11? It was kind of an off day to make that announcement. September 11, it's the day the deal with Iran went through to give them $6 billion that they will, what Iran claims they will use any way they want to. The U.S. says they can't, but Iran says they will. It's interesting how this happens. A radical left-leaning administration tends to be more friendly to radical Islam. A right-leaning administration tends to attack radical Islam. And I'll just tell you this, radical Islam uses both of them to advance their cause in different ways. Terror slaughter. Islamic fanatics behead 50 men and boys on Mozambique football pitch before chopping them up and kidnapping every woman. And the boys had the better end of the deal. And the Pentagon ramps up attacks on resurgent ISIS. It is not defeated. Oh, really? Trump wasn't right on that one. Civil war is brewing in France. Boy, that's close to blowing out. Nigeria, Muslims murdered 3,462 Christians in 200 days. Friends, they kill 2,000 to 3,000 Christians every year, and the last 2 years have been worse. That was Nigeria, where people were in the doorways with machine guns, where I was preaching. Taliban's 20-year victorious alliance with China against the U.S. and the Uyghurs. Oh, let's see, China, radical left, and Taliban, radical Muslim. All over the world, you're going to see this. Israel has been practicing to take out Iran. They continue that practice. I'm going to breeze over this. Current alliances. Russia went into Ukraine, right? What does this do? It exposes the king of the north, king of the south alliances. Russia, China, radical left. North Korea, radical left. Iran, radical Muslim. Syria, radical Islam. They're working together as allies. The secular West, former Christian world, the Pope is working on gaining control and all that. And it's been working. Israel and the United States simulate striking Iran in massive drill. Let me see something. Yeah. ISIS plotted to assassinate George W. Bush in 2022, just over a year ago. That got caught. They were going to be crossing the border, kind of porous along the southern border. So far this year, there have been 160 people on the terror watch list that have been caught crossing the border. Wonder how many they missed. Israel and Iran, 5 minutes to Armageddon midnight. Israel and Iran are just playing around the corners of an all-out war, and it's close. I'm just going to skip through that. Netanyahu, far right-leaning guy back in Israel. He's ready to push the buttons if needed. Now, I want you to notice something. In January of this year, the United States and Israel practice attacking Iran together. It's all the same week. Stakes rise as Iran can fuel several atomic bombs now. The red line for Israel was they're not going to allow that. This is announced while their practice is going on for the U.S. and Israel on how to take out Iranian nuclear facilities. As soon as the practice is over, there's a drone attack on an Iranian weapons factory very successful according to sources. Interesting, right at the end of the practice run, all of a sudden some drones blow up a factory in Iran. U.S. four-star general, this is all still the same week, folks, warns of war with China by 2025. What I've noticed is things happen in bursts. And that was a burst. I cannot tell you when the next burst will be, but they usually come several things really fast. China and Russia encourage Iran to go nuclear. Great. But remember, they're allies. If you were Russia, would you want China and Iran to start pushing the United States while you're at war? China and the United States are at war. You do know that, don't you? The battlefield is Ukraine. It is U.S. weaponry fighting Russian weaponry. And weaponry coming in from North Korea, Iran, etc. for Russia, and the U.S. allies, with permission of the U.S., give stuff to Ukraine. It is a war between the king of the north and the king of the south already. Their political alliances are at war. It's happening. And they're pushing Iran to go nuclear. If you're Russia, you want China to attack Taiwan as soon as possible, and you want Iran to stir up trouble so the U.S. has to spread itself out. It could blow up any moment really big, is what I'm saying, if Russia had its wishes happen. This tells me we're in this conflict. It's called relatively short. It's like a whirlwind, so I don't know how long it can keep going, but the king of the north will attack and wipe out the king of the south's radicals. The moderates follow, and some join together to follow Jesus in the Bible in a loud cry. And that's what you get the next part. I'm going to close with the good news. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many, and he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. The king of the north sets himself up in power. He takes down the king of the south. And yes, I actually believe he will probably set himself up in Jerusalem, as he does, because that's what it says. Oh, wouldn't the Pope love to be in Jerusalem? But tidings from the east and tidings from the north, from Jerusalem, Edom, Moab, and Ammon, those people who escaped by following Jesus, are east. Out of the north, Revelation, come out of her, my people, a remnant comes out of Babylon. God's remnant from Islam and Christianity come together and preach Jesus, and the Bible is the authority. Isn't that good news? There you have the arrows, east and north. And Joel 2, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. When? before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. And all over the world, by the hundreds of thousands, Muslims are having dreams and visions. And they're following Isa, the righteous one, the man in white. That's Jesus. And Jesus is telling them that they're supposed to be following the book as their authority. Let's see. If we have Muslims that are following Jesus as their Savior and the Bible as their authority, they're my brothers and sisters. How about you? Even though they're still Muslim? You see, when I walk into a mosque, I do not say that I'm a Christian, because I do not want to be misunderstood. Because what is a Christian in the Muslim mind? A follower of the Pope, a crusader. Are you a follower of the Pope? Then do not tell a Muslim you're a Christian. What do you tell them? You are a follower of the book and Jesus. Truth. I am a follower of Jesus and the book. And so I walk in and I tell them, hey, I'm a follower of the book. I don't eat pork. I don't drink alcohol. I believe the whole book, not half of it. And I don't worship on the Crusader Day of worship. I follow the book. They look at me and say, who are you? I said, I'm a follower of the book, like I told you. And then I tell them about Daniel 11. It's a lot of fun in most mosques, unless it's a radical mosque. And I found a radical mosque in a place called Colton, California. Hey, somebody from that mosque a couple of weeks later killed 17 people near Loma Linda. It's just a couple of weeks later. I felt fortunate that I got out of that place that day, the pastor and I that went together. But right before the coming of Jesus, this is going to happen, it says, and by the hundreds of thousands it's happening right now. I've talked to many Muslims that have had those dreams and visions. It is so much fun. I'm going to talk about time of the end allies this afternoon. Haven't got too much in the political, but I'll get more into it this afternoon. Didn't want to do that in a worship service, but I will start out that afternoon by telling you this. I'll tell it to you early. No politician saves you. Only Jesus saves you. Amen. No political party saves you. Only Jesus saves you. Amen. No church or culture saves you. Only Jesus saves you. Amen. And we had better get that straight, because the world that we're in is about to change. Revelation 13. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. Do you believe that's going to happen someday? It happened this week in Pomona. Yeah. Did you know that?
Nope.
I'll tell you what that is. MarioMorello.org. What I mean by fire and glory. I know this is September last year. The angry left does not know that they are building a massive backlash. I believe they're setting the stage to bring the greatest number of souls to Christianity in American history. The fire and glory that will fall in the arena Hertz Arena, by the way, is not going to be I said that wrong. Is not just going to be awesome. I believe it will be the greatest display of supernatural power I've ever witnessed. Why? Because we need it. But there's another massive reason. Monday night, Lance will present an explosive message that rips the mask off what is happening in our nation. He will declare a manifesto of awakening that will shake the very foundations of corruption and deception in our government and culture. His presentation will end in a Mount Carmel moment. The fire of God will fall on the audience. What did it say in Revelation 13? that fire was going to fall with signs, wonders, and miracles and deceive people. It's going to happen right at the end. The fire of God will fall on the audience, an audience that will be transformed into an army. Remember, he wanted an army to fight against the left? Be there when the fire of God falls and changes us all forever. On the second night, people are bringing the sick from everywhere to be healed. I already know that the Holy Spirit is going to demonstrate greater and deeper miracles than I've ever experienced in my ministry. This is a well-known Christian evangelist who claims to be a prophet with millions of followers online. That happened. It was supposed to be September of 2022 in Florida, but the hurricane had other plans, and FEMA took over the Hertz Arena as a disaster response. So they didn't get around to having it till December 2023. And large numbers of people were healed to prove that they're right. He just did a series this last week in Pomona, California called Proof for LA. He claims it was the largest healing power to prove their version of what Bible truth is ever. You know, he does several days of meetings, and each one of them, he preaches them. First it starts out with lots and lots of music. Then it goes to a preaching. And then to prove what they say, they have signs and wonders. And it's not just a couple of people healed. He will pick people out in different parts of the room. God told me that you're here, and he describes somebody, and you're right over there, and a person stands up and says, yeah, you're talking about me. And he says, here's your diseases, you're healed. And they start dancing around, they're having. After he does a bunch of those, he says, okay, everybody that needs healing, raise your hand. And he said, if you're near them, put your hands on them. And he prays for everybody, and everybody's healed at one time. That was happening in Pomona this week. The Fire and Glory Tour is going everywhere. It's a backlash against the left, the radical left, out of the French Revolution. It's the King of the North Alliance against the King of the South Alliance. If you were on Mount Carmel back in the days of Elisha, and Elisha has his altar, and the priests of Baal have their altar, what would it have been like for Elisha on Mount Carmel if the fire would have hit Baal's altar, not his? What would the priest of Baal done to him? And the nation would have followed Baal. Revelation 13 tells us that at the end, the fire falls not on God's side, but on the counterfeit side. And what happens to God's people? They go out to kill them and take away their right to buy and sell. You are looking, even in your own area, this is beginning to happen. Don't tell me nothing's happening in this world. It's just the media's not covering it. If you doubt this stuff, mariomorello.org, check what he wrote this week about your area. Now, King of the North with the political right, and the King of the South with the radical left, and God's people get caught in the middle. But good news, Jesus saves. And so take Jesus and the Bible seriously. Study Daniel 11 and 12. Wake up, share with other people. We have books, videos, tracts. You can get them online. The pastor's going to give some out this afternoon. And we do seminars, public and seminars. 10 days we cover Daniel 11 for the public. It is so much fun. And we invite Muslims to show up. I'll go to the mosque on Friday and invite them. And you can also do it in your home. Get our DVDs and do it in your home. But How many of you would be willing to raise your hand and say, after today, I think maybe I do need to study Daniel 11, maybe some more? Please do so. Don't just say you're going to do it. You just raise your hand. Now go do it. Okay. I'm going to just leave it there. Should I just have a closing prayer? Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, keep us awake. Not just wake us up, but keep us awake. Help us not to be so ready to just go to sleep and let the world go on, but help us to love people like you do. Help us to not just see doom and gloom, but to see that you're coming and that it's really time to love you and follow you and love other people. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
All are welcome to join us for the potluck in the gym. We'll reconvene here